my job, I feel like. Part of it is to identify, but to be honest, also part of it is also help the founders, right? And I think I want to keep leveraging some of the knowledge, but network and things I can establish.
So out of curiosity, since you have to, get in before, the hype cycle, what's in your crystal ball? Can you tell us? Can you give us the hint so we can get in on the ground floor too?
And I hope I'm always right, but that's not definitely the case. So you don't want to hear my crystal ball, because it's a ball of mess, right? It's a ball of like possibilities. I mean, venture is, end of the day, it's all kinds of possibilities that some plays out, some doesn't. There enough, can I see enough energy that this will be the next Docker, this will be the next Kubernetes, this will be the next Kafka, this will be next whatever, because it has to change the industry, right? Anything that requires new buying power has to change the industry. If it doesn't, then it's just a tool, right? That tool can make a huge amount of money too, like Datadog, but then it's a different kind of infrastructure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. I'm one of the co-hosts, Matt Yonkovit, joined once again with Avi Press.
Hello.
Hey. And today we've got Timothy Chen on from Essence Venture Capital, as well as the co-host of the Open Source Startup Podcast, which is exciting.
Which everyone should check out. It's a great
Indeed.
podcast.
Yes. Timothy, how you doing?
Doing good, sir. Thanks for having me on.
We're excited to have you on, actually. We've been looking forward to this so we can dive into what you're seeing in the market and where things are going, and maybe get a little bit of advice for our listeners in the open source space.
VC advice, yeah, just don't listen to me, man. Like, no broken record, right? Or whatever. Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. So, Timothy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Introduce yourself to people who might not know who you are.
Yeah, sounds good. I will do my intro. I think given this open source podcast, which is of course my favorite topic, I'll give you some of my backgrounds on that too. So I'm Tim, I started this fund called Essence VC, back a lot of open source infrastructure thingies, pre-seed and seed, that kind of thing. But prior life, and I hope it's current life, I don't try to detach myself that much. Yeah, I've been working on open source a lot. I was early contributor to different projects. I feel like my career is really built around open source one way or another. Apache Foundation core member, committer and PMC for Drill and Mesos, joined a couple companies like Mesosphere and stuff like that. Grid AI for PyTorch Lightning, started CNCF, helps start CNCF back in the day, and Mesosphere as well. So yeah, personally operated in this space for a while. Work on Kafka team at LinkedIn, so stuff like that. So that's kind of my background. As an engineer, just saw a bunch of these big infra transitions on open source side, and now on the dark side. Yeah.
Now on the dark side, come on. It's not that dark, is it?
It's whatever people call it now, Yeah, I gotta embrace the identities, right? All my friends are like, Tim, why? Don't you start hate to code now? So now I still try to code, man. I found it to be also exciting too. Yeah.
How often do you get to write code? Oh, sorry, Matt. I didn't mean to cut you.
Go for it.
I don't know.
How often do you get to write code as a VC?
I think, to be honest, one of the ways I keep sanity being a VC, I think is because I started my own fund. So I feel like if I really join other funds, I'm not sure I'm going to be as happy. But because I started my own, you kind of can do whatever. Not saying you just randomly deploy capital, like whatever. It's more like your time. What things move the needle for your fund? You can have your own ways to doing it. And I still write code. I actually, I don't just, everybody writes code to some degree. And as a VC, if technical, they write some websites, do this and that. Sure. I wrote probably 10 patches to Wasm recently as a compiler. Before that, I was working on zero knowledge proof. The stuff I work on is always in the infra layers, the system layers, and I try to keep doing that, because otherwise I feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna be blah blah blahing with some other VCs like usual. So I don't want to be like that. Like if I want to back something in WebAssembly, I gotta go deep into WebAssembly to know what's going on, to even have I don't feel so weird talking about something that I have no clue about, Yeah.
And so is that why you focus on those areas then, like from a investment
Yeah, because it's the most interesting to me. I think like zero knowledge proof, obviously for crypto, I still think it's going to be very, very, very powerful, right? As a primitive, it's just like crypto as a space, probably not as exciting as before, or, you know, the hype wasn't as high as it before. But when you look at a technology shift, you know, or very powerful sort of technique that I think has a lot of implications. WebAssembly obviously is one of them, right? Zero knowledge proof. And you can go down that rabbit hole, like, you know, TPMs or enclaves, right? You can look at any sort of infra-ish primitives or algorithms or whatever. I was like, okay, I got to get to the meat of this, right? To be able to tell, because, you know, my job is back pre-seeds. Like, things will take off in 2 years, not right now. If it's already took off, it's, you know, crazy rounds, crazy everything. Like, I'm not gonna able to write, you know, very meaningful check size into it. So my job, I feel like, part of it is to identify, but to be honest, also part of it is also help the founders, right? And I think I want to keep leveraging some of the knowledge but network and things I can establish. And when I back a company doing WebAssembly, it's like, hey, I already got some friends in bytecode alliances. We have some friends around these things, and I don't show up as a VC. You know, I'm in the six discussing stuff too. You know, I'm not going to be the best person or smartest person at all. I know I even try to pretend that, but I'm not useless at least. You know, I can still be useful as someone, as an engineer participating, and I think that gives me some leverage as well.
So, out of curiosity, since you have to, you know, get in before, you know, the hype cycle, what's in your crystal ball? Can you tell us? Can you give us the hint so we can get in on the ground floor too?
You know, and I hope I'm always right, but that's not definitely the case. So you don't want to hear my crystal ball, because it's a ball of mess, right? It's a ball of like possibilities. I mean, venture is, end of the day, it's all kinds of possibilities that some plays out, some doesn't. And I think a lot of people sometimes forgot about it, that all these best, you know, great companies like Databricks or Confluence, like they all look like smashing successes and they all go so great. The same investors looking like geniuses, you know, they back a bunch of weird stuff that question your intelligence too, right?
Well, nobody talks about those ones, right? The skeletons in the closet.
They don't talk about themselves, right? But, you know, if you're in a space, you're like, oh, this guy backed that one. You know, whoever backed Docker early and believe that will be the next container, there's no way, right? There's no way you have ever predicted that, right? They didn't do that stuff at all. So, you know, it's a funky. I say this because from a crystal ball point of view, I think my job isn't trying to predict perfectly on what actually will work. I think my job is to eliminate things that would just definitely not work. You know, because I think, you know, what I can't say 100% all the time. Like, this is what AI infra should look like. This is where vector database will be going, or this is where, you know, how everybody will use Enclave, you know, by default in the next few years, right? You know, it could happen, it couldn't. But is a possibility there? What is the biggest hurdles and friction? And is there something that's fundamentally impossible, right? And I want to get that right so that I don't look at a thing and I was like, maybe that will be possible. Maybe we can just write a data dot that's 1,000x cheaper and everything in S3, and of course everything will just work out. You know, there's trade-offs here. You can't just assume everything. Like, it's possible, but, you know, what are limitations? So to me, my job, I don't have like I know two trends definitely work. You know, here's the way to just back those buses. To me, it's like, make sure I actually know the possibilities. I think I can get to have somewhat of a sense of estimating, okay, will this possibly work? Is this the best team I think this can make that happen, of what they're saying? And so with my background and knowledge, with what the founder is saying, is that, do I see a possible path here, or paths? Because if I don't, I can't back it, right? I don't want to back something that's just, unless the team is so incredibly crazily strong, you know. But
so are you like looking yourself, or are people coming to you with pitches and you're just buried in like, you know, ooh, that was a bad idea? Like how does that work for you right now? Are you getting like, you know, just kind of picking and choosing what looks interesting and what kind of catches your eye? Is it more on the team or the people involved or the idea or a combination?
I don't know. I think it changes for me, because when I started 2019, so my story, right? I was a founder. I started a company back in 2016 with a professor at Stanford, right? And we went after Kubernetes space. Eventually got small exit to Cloudera 2018, and I started angel investing 2018. And then when I started my fund at 19, I don't know much about I can never work on any VC fund. I've never done any angel investments. Like, it's not like I have a bunch of friends or MBAs. Like, I'm your typical engineer that work on engineer stuff. You can imagine that. Like, that's just who I am, right? That you see me on my Apache mailing list all the time, that kind of person. I don't know nothing about investing, not much. So when I started, really just backing people I know and people I like. And that's how most people start, I think. I don't know how to look at markets. I don't know look at like anything. And I think right now it really changes over time. When the fund one was really small, 1 million writing 25, 50K checks. Fund two is like 7 million writing 100K checks. Those are like small angel checks. So your job sort of changes over time. We're like, hey, you're finding great teams that has ton of great backing, right? And you can see some opportunity to participate. And you learn from the great investing folks along the way of how they look at other things that I'm missing. Maybe it's the market, maybe it's the team dynamics, maybe it's the grits or whatever, right? Every investor has their ways to identify people. And I think I have unique ways to identify people given who I am. Like, I'm an engineer. I can smell engineer. And I can smell that engineer really quickly than most other folks. Is this BSing, right, or not? And I can get a sense very quickly, can they build or not? I'm not going to be the perfect thing, but I'm sure compared to most other investors, I think I have a way faster smell lane of that. But then I have to learn everything else, right? I have to go pick up, like, what is the product dynamics? How do people sell to insurances? How do people sell this and that? And I think, fortunately, I was a founder myself. So I had to go through that journey, try to sell to large companies. And so back to your question, I think for me, I'm been more fortunate now that I think I've built this fund very specifically for infrastructure. And so a lot of people start to notice that. So I have more people coming to me than ever. So the day kind of changes now because, obviously podcasts helps a lot, can get some content out there, you build some brand out there. So I've been working with a lot more earlier teams, with pre-idea, pre-product, helping them to figure out what the right markets are, helping figure out what the right ideas are. And I actually really like that. So that's kind of the changes now. I'm writing larger check sizes to much earlier pre-seeds, and doing more that kind of rounds right now.
It's an interesting, I guess, contrast between, the backgrounds in engineering. And so, like, I imagine there's a lot of, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Like, intuitional desire to be analytical about these things and maybe even quantitative about these things at some point, right? But, pre-seed and seed, there's not necessarily a ton to go off of to be quantitative. And so it makes total sense to me that, kind of being able to, like, sniff out the bullshit if someone's saying that they can build a thing that you don't, may or may not agree with. As your check sizes are getting bigger and as you have more, VC experience under your belt, do you find that there are places where you are being more quantitative and analytical with how you're, like, doing diligence or analyzing market opportunity or whatever that looks like? And if so, like, where is that coming up?
Yeah, actually, I feel like it's a flip side. It's on a reverse. When you're looking at a company, I feel like VCs are way more quantitative because most VCs backgrounds are more financial banker backgrounds. They look at market caps, they look at all the units, all the sort of like the basic unit economics, right? The CACs and everything, and they try to figure all that stuff out a lot of times. If not everything, but a couple of them, right, up front. Whereas I feel like engineer investors like us, like me especially, I think we're less quantitative on the market, but we're more qualitative on the sort of like the technology and products to some degree. You can't put a number on a research paper, right? So I don't know what quantitative can it be, but like, hey, look at this. This is the next generation of the cloud that can fly on your phones or whatever, and it's built on this basic, beautiful peer-to-peer, crazy, just making up stuff. But it's such a unique technological innovation. It's so cool. I get actually asked this more often than from LPs. LPs are people that back my funds, right? Tim, are you going to just back cool engineer shits,
Yeah.
That's looks cool, feels cool, but commercially have no instincts that this can ever actually make money. Because as a business, you're trying to make money. So I have to be more quantitative when it comes to market opportunities as an investor.
What do you look at then? So I know like the cool thing can pique your interest, but are there certain metrics or certain data you're looking for to help kind of give you that assurance?
This is the hardest part about investing at the early stage. And, I was kind of jokingly talking to quite a few investors recently about, if you notice these companies like Instabase or Databricks, or even back in Mesosphere to a little bit, I still vividly remembered early as a Databricks because I wasn't part of the company, but I interviewed it really early. Reno reached out to me to interview for, I think there's like less than 10 people back in the day. It was Berkeley's second floor office. I was in an interview loop. I was Apache PMC for Drill, which is another SQL on Hadoop project, right? And so Reno found me. I was working on Kafka, and he's like, "Hey Tim, you want to come down and interview with us? We like your backgrounds, working on SQL stuff. We need somebody to work on like SQL compilers when I saw them at like Databricks at such an early time, they have zero revenue. Like they have some support revenue, I think. No product, nothing are selling. And what's even more crazier is if you ask the founders, how are you going to make money? They can't tell you. They have nothing to say, like, oh, this will change the industry. We'll figure out. They literally said that, actually. We'll figure out. They're not even attempt to explain to you. And so I'm sure they're not going to even tell their investors because this is already post-investing. This is like some time have flown by. Like even earlier stage, they can't tell you at all. I made a big mistake. Red Panda founder is my good friend Alex. And when I met him early, he showed me his early prototype of doing this, fast, basically like I think it's like a deep, like a offloading storage library you can use that can way faster writing bytes into the disk, right? And so hey, I can do a way faster Kafka, and I worked on Kafka, and it was like, who cares about a faster Kafka? No one in the users we know of latency wise, no one truly cares as much. It was only throughput, right? We were way better throughputs. You just make sure you had enough batch writes. You had to figure out how to get the protocols, and so I didn't back his pre-seed because I didn't know if a faster Kafka makes any sense. But one thing that really changes a lot in these companies, you can't really look at how much market it is or not. Like they can't tell you. Unfortunately, these founders can't tell you so very vividly about what the commercial opportunities are. I have to come up with myself. But then I have to understand the commercial side, though, right? Because if you don't, then you're just back anybody that sounds like an interesting technology either. Yeah. So I think it's actually funky that part of my job is to work with a lot of deeply technical founders that have no idea how to tell you what the commercial TAM or whatever. But I have some intuition what are right TAMs to go after and trying to be somewhat selective in that, right? Like, okay, it's so much of a dead end. There's no way the market has anything. And I thankfully passed on a lot of rounds because of that. And it played out, right? but I will be wrong sometimes too. So, but that's kind of my job, is to understand the markets, understand what the buying looks like for enterprises, understand where the budget might be changing, what possible things that can change. Is there enough? Can I see enough energy that this will be the next Docker, this will be the next Kubernetes, this will be the next Kafka, this will be next whatever? Because it has to change the industry, right? Anything that requires new buying power has to change the industry. If it doesn't, then it's just a tool, right? That tool can make a huge amount of money too, like Datadog, but then it's a different kind of infrastructure. So for every different kinds of companies that they're looking to create, I have to look at the possibilities and how it possibly can play out, and what the possible markets they can go after, what are possible things they have some decent understanding, not perfect. There's a chance for them. They can understand how to sell in that market, or they can build that community. And can I think this is the right opportunity with the right price and everything? That's what goes in my head all the time, right? It's just like,
Fair enough.
I have to play my own devil advocates, because I learned you can't just listen to the founder alone. And
Right. So you're
all that
looking at all those
information.
external things.
Yeah, you can't just like transcribe it, put into text, pass it GPT-3, and you're good to go. Passes, okay, wire. I can't do that yet. Maybe there's a model that can do that very specifically, but right now, I have to play a sort of human judgment game that takes their story and then derives another story on my own.
Fair enough. So
This could be very interesting that the founder hasn't fully able to grasp on the commercial side, right? But it has enough energy that it could happen.
So let me throw a couple things out there and get your take on them. Like, so when you see somebody who's coming to talk to you and they go, we've got 5,000 GitHub stars, are you like, ooh, that's interesting? Or are you like, eh?
I mean, it's funny. It really, really depends.
Okay.
Right? There's so many AI projects have 60,000 stars in a month or 2 months. It's like, okay, should I back that? Should I not back that? You don't know. I think at this point you can't take all stars as equal now, for sure. Some particular things get stars way easier than others, and some particular projects get stars from people that doesn't matter either.
Right.
And so we can't just look at star counts. It's getting weaker as a proxy, I would say. I think it used to be a very strong proxy for a while, until everybody's like start engineering their stars. Then it becomes almost useless as a proxy. So actually, I don't treat it as a negative signal, but I don't treat it as like, oh wow, 50,000 stars in a month. It's like, should you just back it for no reason? Like, just close your eyes, just wire money? Is that really the way you should do it? Because it's such a big increase. For some spaces, I will say maybe, right? But, with AI, there's a ton of those. And I was actually thinking of tweeting today. Like, I think there's a lot of projects that got so hyped, I didn't even know they exist anymore. Right? Wow. The last 3-6 months ago, like you hear all these crazy projects got a lot of stars. Like, are they still going to be around?
How much of that is the economy, though, right? So with the changes and stuff, so
I mean, I think stars are more hype than the economy. AI is AI, and so it's on everyone's mind, right? Crypto got a bunch of stars, for a bunch of projects back in the day either. So, so I think smart investors I talk to already start to do their own star analysis. Like I see what investors are doing. They basically take the stars, they derive your stars into fake profiles that never had any single commits, or just created like, okay, they already delete them. And then look at the actual geography from the stars. Okay, is all from one single country, because of what reason, and really dissect it into a world map. And then you look at that and say, is this actually a true interesting thing or not? And timeline as well, like how fast it is. And so everybody does it now. They don't talk about it that much because it's their secret sauce-ish, I don't know, part of it. It's not really that secret, but it just, I think we all learned at this point, stars, that single number can't be treated as the golden truth. You kind of have to take another approach on top of that to dissect it.
So I guess It's very true that like, someone puts, random AI project on Hacker News and it's got 20K stars that day because it fits so squarely into what the hype is right now. And I think, yeah, definitely saw very similar things with crypto projects a couple of years ago. Like, I'm curious, like, how you look at the role of that kind of hype in how you think about how it guides your own investing. And I guess also how you think that should or should not guide entrepreneurs who are looking to like figure out kind of what the next thing is. Like, is it like, is it too late to get into AI right now because there's already so much hype? Is it too late for you to invest in it already because there's so much hype? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the struggle for everybody, investors and founders and everyone involved. Because I think every market, every economy, the hype helps a lot of things, right? It helps the awareness. You don't have to go tell any Fortune 100 now why AI is so important and why you should even think about LLMs, right? I don't think we don't have to do that anymore. The market is screaming way louder than ever, right? But then, of course, the downside is the competition is so high, right? Incumbents is probably way more dangerous than ever in this race, right? The secret of investing is still it's you gotta have to be playing early than others to some aspect. And so you can be in the hype cycle, but back something that's non-obvious in the hype category. Like, is the new GPU the thing you should back? Is a new NVIDIA should exist? Some people are really contemplating that. Should we have another OpenAI that's very specific to certain things, right? Agent specific or some other crazy non-transformer model that can change the world. Like, just let's go after some crazy S4 or RWKV, whatever, right? All these are kind of up and coming, so you don't know which model will work. So maybe fund another big lab that can turn to another OpenAI because it's fundamentally something that you can play all these games. Some people have way more capital to play these kind of larger games, and some people have more less capital to play other games. So we all pick our lanes, but the job essentially is you have to be non-consensus and right a few times to make the fund return big. And so I think in hype cycles or non-hype cycles, we have to basically, I think as AI specifically, my job is to get as close to the ground of what's happening from both the buying side and the research side and the technology side, and take some educated guesses. What could possibly be the most interesting things to do in the next 2 years or 1 year? I think we can't even say 2 years anymore, 1 year. And then decide what is the right parameters to back what kind of teams to do what kind of things, Because I think right now with AI, at least, no one can predict 2 years from now. So how can you back things? You can't predict the 5, 10 years, 7 years outcomes. So then you just have to back the teams I think are well positioned to explore something that potentially can be the next big thing, rather than trying to pick a very specific idea, And that's my own personal take on this. Like, I'd rather find great teams that have open-mindedness, right? Not like I'm very down going down this thing alone and I'm gonna spend 12 people up front and full throttle execution, assuming that will be big in the next 1 or 2 years. I think that's a dangerous move right now. Right?
And is that because of like the economic shift that that type of a move is just it's not been panning out? Or
like, let's say that you pick a prompt security tool, that can look at PII data and whatever, and so okay, it's needed. Everybody needs some guardrails and stuff like that, and so you can pick that space. Might be very important. I think it's definitely important. But then, of course, OpenAI will add a bunch of things. Azure add a bunch of things. There might be new techniques to do some things as well. Maybe some other way better architecture that can eliminate some other things. Like, you never really know. Like the fundamental technologies change so fast, right? Mm. So when we backed like code security tools, things doesn't change as often, right? You always need SAST and DAST. You always need, some level of this and that, unless you fundamentally change the programming language or fundamentally change the programming runtimes, which doesn't change that often, right? So you don't have to assume things will shift in a year or so. But then if you imagine I'm going to be backing a code security tool, but my programming language and the runtime, everything changes Java into some crazy thing in a year. I was like, okay, how do we back that? That tool could be just basically obsolete in 6 months, and some other team, maybe well positioned, can go after it. And so you're like, okay, it's not clear. I don't want to be not backing anything either, right? You can take the stance like nothing will work out. I don't think that's true either. So, to me, the easier bet is to say, let's back teams that I think have enough momentum to explore and continue to build something that can stick around at least for now. But the underlying thing might be able to be swappable, and they're as close to the metal, so to speak. They have the ability to be closer to the metal than other teams. That if fundamentally technology shifts, they are well equipped to shift with it.
So that ability to pivot and to make quick decisions, and to kind of capitalize on the changes before they become.
Which I think really personally, important. If you want to be in this game doing AI stuff, you got to understand the fundamentals. You can't just call OpenAI.
Well, you can't type it in. You can't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think, right? You want to be something, especially tooling infra, right? You're not going to just building a tool for OpenAI. So, you have to fundamentally able to build something that can stand up on top of Eleuther's or Hugging Faces and some whatever thing. You have to have your own ability that can, and I actually think in AI, system ability is actually still way important than other. How do you understand lower level systems? How do you squeeze performance? How do you get, that skill set is still very, very valuable than ever.
So I'm curious, with your focus or your background in the open source space, and with the recent things that we've seen, like HashiCorp moving away from pure open source license, do you still think that open source is one of those check marks that you're looking for, or do you think that it's less important or getting less important to maybe not just yourself, but maybe other investors in the space? Have we reached a point where maybe open source has evolved, or maybe there's something new on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm not sure open source has been evolving for sure. I think licensing is probably a big part of it, right? I don't think the HashiCorp license change is truly that big of a deal from an investment point of view, because I think we already see that coming for the most part. We all treat open source as a great marketing tool one way or another, and I think I do view as part of it. As long time people that we all worked at open source is such a great way to build a very authentic community as well. I think that's why we fell in love with it. We don't like it because it's like a faster CAC or something. I think we all grew up with a phase where open source really means a lot to us. Like it's our identity, so to speak. And so I think you're asking, like, is open source important as an investor from a company point of view? It's not necessary, right? I don't only back open source based companies, and I don't tell everybody you got to open source something. There's some spaces you definitely have to open source, like if you're building a front end framework, or anything developer very code specific that you have to play with. Not sure you can not open source, or if you're trying to gain trust on some really critical systems and you have nothing to show, you have no crazy backgrounds, that I've built this in whatever X company, I'm just putting it out there, right? Like you have maybe some good backgrounds, or maybe a good researcher has some crazy techniques, but you haven't built a real reliable system yet, then open source is a way better way to build trust, right? Because I think startups, as you know, the biggest risk is time, right? You can only raise that much capital. and you only have that much time to prove whatever. Like this might be good in 5 years, but you only raised for a year. So, I think that's really the biggest, hardest part of all is I have to bet something that can happen in 6 to 12 months, maybe max 18 months, right? 24 months of
say this
runway.
a lot too. Like time is just it's the
Time
tough
is the
part
most
about this whole
important thing ever. You waste time, you have 30% more likely to die, right? And if you waste 3 to 6 months time, you definitely have 1/3 of chance just wasted most of the time. And so, we all will make mistakes, unfortunately, as founders. So that's why you have to minimize the mistake making as much as possible, right? Rather than trying to do big swings all the time, So it's that's the hardest part. Is open source, like that's why I still believe in open source a lot, and I still really like open source because I still believe it's one of the fastest path for you to find product market fit in quite a lot of places, But is this like a last enduring business model? Is this like the best way? Everybody will be using it for all kinds of successes commercially? Not really. A lot of companies don't even spend that much time on open source anymore, right? Especially like large incumbents, they basically funnel all their customers to a cloud. No mention of open source whatsoever because they got there, right? Open source is still there. You can still take the code. You can still, and I think the HashiCorp thing. Right, it's getting everyone very nervous because a lot of people uses the tool that also has other products and services, right? So it's like the middle ground. Most people are just using it, shouldn't worry about the license, but that middle ground is where everybody is most worried about, right? And how much if HashiCorp becomes evil, trying to like in this like gray area, try to fight everyone to death, which shouldn't happen, but who knows, right? It's a risk. So anyway, I still believe in open source, given I'm an early stage investor. I think given time is so precious, you should do whatever maximizes your chances to succeed. Not trying to be picky, I hate open source, I'm not going to do it. Well, if you can find product market fit without it, you should. A lot of times, though, you shouldn't box yourself in, too, as a founder. You should do whatever it takes to be the most successful possible, because then you'll be accounting to a lot of other mistakes you'll be making, and so many people just run on a runway and they're gone. Yeah.
I feel like with a lot of these kind of lessons that you're seeing your portfolio companies like learn firsthand, ones that you probably learned firsthand as a founder, and then more uniquely perhaps talking to tons and tons of open source founders with your podcast. I'm really curious, what trends have really stuck out to you, or things that have been particularly interesting when it comes to kind of the breed of entrepreneurs that focus on this kind of software methodology? Like what's been sticking out to you after talking to so many people in this space?
We have 100 episode recently came out, right?
Congratulations!
Nice.
Yeah, it takes a lot. We have other coming out, obviously, but
Sure.
so we definitely talked to a lot of founders at this point. It's always interesting. I feel like even though we might be asking the same questions over and over, we never pre-can the questions that much. We have a few template questions, but we go off pretty often, depending on who it is and what it is, and what the response is. And I noticed my questions start to change, even compared to like 2 years ago, as I go along on the investing side. One most interesting thing I really feel very intrigued about is this idea of pivoting, because so many of my pre-seed or even seed, everybody pivots to some degree. Not hard pivot, like big pivot, like completely change category, change space, change everything. It happened a few times. But most people, that their product they built on their pitch deck and what they actually do changes so much, even multiple times during the execution.
Yeah.
And I feel way better if they do change,
Oh, wow.
Which is because we just have to assume no one truly knows. Because if you are raising a early round, means you haven't proven that much yet, right? Like if you have everything, proven, executed, you will raise a much larger round, right? I'll just happily participate, and whatever. There's a reason we're doing this early seed round or pre-seed round is because lots of things are up in the air. So I actually think one of the hardest thing of good founders needs to navigate is when to pivot, really. And I think most people would do it way too late, right? It's the same thing like as firing employees in startups. Most founders always do it way too late, I included. And this is the hardest part is knowing when to pivot, because the hardest phase of the hardest challenge are when companies are not doing particularly bad, and also, of course, you won't pivot if it's doing particularly great. This middle gray area that I'm still getting some traction. I still have a few paying customers. I still have a few things here and there. I'm just betting on a bunch of other features, or yet another release, or another product, and things will turn around quickly after X, after Y, after Z, And I don't know, more often than not, for some reason, they don't pan out,
It's especially hard in open source to do that because, especially if you're very community focused, like to shift around is, I think in a lot of contexts, really looked down upon, whether correctly or incorrectly. And I think this is kind of one of the exact things that I've been, Matt and I get in arguments about this all the time of just like, when we're talking about license changes, like, this is something, this approach served our business and this is what we aim to do, but things change and now we need to do this. And I think I think the fact of being an open source company or founder or whatever just makes that, that's maybe one thing that we should all be thinking about and talking about more, just that it's harder to pivot in the space a little bit because you have to, the downside transparency, I guess.
Yeah. And I think open source project, obviously, if you have a lot of traction, you tend to just stick with it because your commercial product can change quite a bit, right? So you're not so locked in. Oftentimes I feel like the companies that really should pivot and really should consider doing is things are just so in the middle, like flatline growth, linear growth for a long time, and it's not like they will definitely not work out. Like I think the famous company people point to is LinkedIn has linear growth all the time as a social network, never have exponential growth, and they made it, right? But I don't know, social networks versus what we're doing, I think infrastructure, the stickiness of infrastructure is so large, you need way more power to rip it off, right? So you need quite a lot of things to happen for infra or tooling to be widely successful, And so if you don't find any shape or form of that in quite a long time, it's going to be hard for you to win. So I don't know. This is some of the hardest part of a founder's mind is have to be so many things, right? Even just getting the payroll is already hard enough, right? What accounting, book service, and whatever, all these kind of stuff. No one wants to do it, but it's a pain, right? But the biggest part is just what you do as a company is really so important, right? That is hard. That is hard because no one is so, you can't be quantitative. I wish we can just be quantitative. Let's just put out a survey and we just do a company based on numbers. Like I wish we could do that, but it never works, right? Because if it's a startup that not many competition is there, there's a reason for it, right? It's just nuance. Somebody has to have a strong belief, and it plays out. And so that's the hard part. Is I think my job oftentimes is to figure out how to work with founders to really provide almost like another third person view that hopefully they respect a lot, because I'm not a stranger to this space, right? I'm not a generalist VC that backs consumer and SaaS and a little bit infra. Like, I got investors on my cap table before and I was like, okay, this is not so useful listening to them.
We've all got
You know,
'em.
and so you know, I really respected personally when as a founder, people that really know this space and they know how to really think about this space. And the people, I also think like people that really knows about the space tend, well, most founders are so religious, they will tell you straight up what they believe. When you have another founder as an angel, but you know, I think good investors that do a little bit more specific, but broader in terms of what kinds of companies, you don't have strong religion anymore. You see all kinds of stuff work out. So my job is to basically provide a third person view that it's not forcing opinion, but I'm definitely trying to force a bit of a point of view that, hey, you cannot just assume.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
before any data points, you'll always be right?
Yeah.
We have to challenge a little bit here as well.
Yeah, I think those are really great points. I mean, I think two things that you said that really stick out. One is pivoting early is better, and being able to recognize that, hey, maybe something needs to change. And that's especially true in the infrastructure space because, like you said, infrastructure's notoriously hard to rip out and change. And I think this gets back to, you know, Avi, even your point on like the open source side, you know, changing the community around. If you've got a database, if you've got, you know, something on the storage layer and people are already building on it, relying on it to say like, we're going to pivot completely, that becomes a really dangerous thing, and it generates a lot of bad will the longer it goes. So the earlier you can get ahead of that, the better.
Yeah, but you know, it's always easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's the
always,
hard part.
always. And
That's
I
the
think
hard part.
and I think the other great thing is a lot of founders who are starting out need to build that network of people who do have advice and have seen these things, because there's a lot of really important things that, let's be honest, as an engineer, you're right. You know, who thinks about payroll? Who thinks about like, you know, like some of the benefit stuff, or who, like, it just doesn't go through your mind. I want to build cool stuff. I want to, you know, go out there and shake the world. What do you mean I've got to figure out these legal contracts?
I want to make sure my employees have smooth onboarding onto their health insurance.
Yeah, like, I don't know.
It's
That,
like,
yeah,
what is that?
can I
So-
eat stats? No, I could eat code.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
but Tim, speaking of pivoting, it is,
Yeah.
we're almost out of time here. And so we want to be respectful of time. We do like to end with a few rapid fire questions, if you're willing
Okay.
to answer some rapid fire questions for us.
Sure.
All righty. All right. So, Tim, what kind of laptop are you using right now, and what is the operating system?
Oh, I'm on my desktop, and it's
okay.
a Windows machine. To be
Okay.
honest,
Oh, that's fine. Hey.
I got WSL running. It's been great actually.
Okay. All right. What is your code editor of choice?
I mean, it's been Emacs for a while. VS Code has been really great. So, you know, I usually stick with Emacs whenever I can. I still feel comforting, to be honest. It's way more snappier, faster. All my plugins are there.
Yeah.
You know, VS Code can sometimes win with some extensions, but, you know, for front end stuff. But when I'm working on Rust code and Go, I go back to Emacs. Like, yeah, this is way, I don't need any UI.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Love it. Love it.
What are you coding in nowadays? Like, if you do get to touch code, what's your preferred language?
Right now, actually, because I'm doing a bunch of more internal products and projects, like I'm helping sourcing, I'm helping looking at data, parsing GitHub, and I'm setting up my little infrastructure for my fund. Python is always easiest to do this bunch of stuff, especially some AI stuff I want to add. Like, go find 3 design partners that fit that, and all my friends at LinkedIn. You know, I'll pull down all their profiles, you know, and then do some LLM analysis. You know, I want to provide these tools, and you know, so I like right now I'm doing those necessary things. So it's all Python.
There you go.
And JavaScript. Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Get shit
What is
done.
the one tool you couldn't live without?
One tool. Wow. I guess it has. Well, maybe Zoomish, but you know, I can still use Hangout. I'm doing VCing completely remotely, so I guess maybe the microphone actually, if you think about that.
Oh, okay. Oh,
You know,
fair enough.
because you know, I actually think, yeah, a good mic makes so much difference.
It does.
You know,
Yes.
until I never had one before, and then once you switch, like, oh wow, I can start to actually listen to myself a little bit.
Very important if you're on the phone all the time or on video.
Yeah, I think it is.
Important.
Yeah.
So what is your what's your favorite conference to go to kind of learn new things? Like, is there a conference that you just love to go?
One thing I like to do a lot is not any conference, actually. So I have a Discord channel called Yet Another Infra Group.
Okay.
We have meetups and hangouts.
Oh, cool.
So I call that my conference. It's basically hang out with people I know and people that we get to meet. Because at the end of the day, I don't know what I call myself. I still call myself, I am an introvert for sure. Like, I don't really like big crowds, and have to go meet people in conferences. And these talks, I feel I can listen to them online either way. Like, why should I sit there? So it's just like, okay, I don't like the big settings. So I just love hanging out with friends, in a smaller setting, one-on-one. I was like, hey man, what's happening? What's the crazy research? And so that's why I like to make friends that are doing really cool stuff. So I'll just hang out with them. I help them out. They help me out. I was like, hey, what research are you looking at? What cool papers that you read? What cool repos can I check out, this and that? And we just exchange all the time. Like, hey, look at this crazy. I just saw a paper came out today. I sent it to a friend. Like, hey, cloud optimization becomes a query optimization. Oh, wow, it's crazy. Anyway, that's my favorite thing. It's more informal friends gathering. Yeah.
Well, that kind of negates my last question, which is I always ask, what's your walk-up music at a conference? But let's say someone is going to write your, documentary. What music will they use as the intro to your documentary? How about we phrase it like that?
Good adaptation.
Yeah. I love jazz. So some kind of funk or jazz music. I think maybe funk music will be great to get in there.
Do you have like a favorite band or song? Because we're going to make a playlist with all these.
Yeah, I don't have like a playlist actually.
Okay.
Earth, Wind, and Fire kind of thing. Might be interesting. Yeah, it's
Earth,
dated,
Wind, and Fire.
It's still good, man. It's still good.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We'll put you down for Earth, Wind, and Fire song.
All right, man. That sounds good to me.
All right. Well, Tim, we want to thank you for hanging out with us.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Don't forget to check out the podcast. Where can they find the podcast on your? Is it on all the podcast channels?
Yeah, all podcast channels, Open Source Startup Podcast. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for hanging out, and everybody's listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe. We would love to hear from you. Please provide feedback. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.